Hi, I'm John, and welcome to Christ Church Online. We're in the middle of our series on Ecclesiastes, and today we are talking about, can accomplishment bring happiness? So today is the fourth talk in our series on the book of Ecclesiastes. The author, probably King Solomon, narrates his personal search to find meaning in life. One of the pathways that he chooses to explore is pleasure. And we talked about that. Another pathway is wisdom. And today we are talking about accomplishments as the pathway to fulfilling happiness and meaning in life. Now, I want to ask you, how many accomplishments do you need to be really happy? Is it a matter of quantity or quality? Overcoming obstacles? Reputation? We're going to read the text a little bit in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 3 to 11, and I'm reading from the NIV, and so you can follow along or you can look it up later. The author says, I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their life. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem ever had before me. I amassed silver and gold and precious stones, the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers, and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing that my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. So I say, the protagonist, the hero of our story, has many accomplishments. Historians say that Solomon became famous throughout the ancient world for his wisdom, but also for his construction projects, the mighty temple that he built, his riches, his governance, and the worldwide web of influence that he created without any help from Instagram or any other social media. Solomon became so famous for his achievements and accomplishments that 1,000 years later, during the time of Jesus, the people still remembered Solomon as a top model of a successful man. Now, I have never been to Machu Picchu, but I hope to go one day. This year I read two very recommendable books about the history and of the Inca Empire. Those people had knowledge and capacity that we don't even begin to understand today. They created massive buildings, conquered territories, governed vast regions, and developed using the accomplishments of other, more ancient civilizations who were themselves incredibly capable and knowledgeable in ways we can only imagine. Many of you probably know more about that than me, so I'm just pointing it out to remind us how we are still amazed ourselves today by a civilization that achieved their greatness many centuries ago. There are so many mysteries in our life. Great civilizations have come and gone, massive and intricate constructions, science, knowledge, in many different regions of the world, right? Well, without a doubt, Solomon was one of the greatest of all times. Solomon was, for his world, perhaps what Messi is in our world, a superstar with a unique talent and a magical capacity to capture the attention of the watching public and even to change the mood of an entire continent with just a half an hour out on the soccer field. Solomon's accomplishments included all the proverbial trophies, competitions, possible prizes. He received the attention from the paparazzi of his time. He had visits from all the important people, all his friends, and anyone of interest he wanted to meet. But he only received them when he wanted to, and only if he wanted to. No one could make Solomon spend time on anything he didn't like, since he was at the very top of his world. You've heard of the Queen of Sheba? Well, 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 1 to 12 tells her story. When the Queen of Sheba heard of Solomon's fame, which brought honor to the name of the Lord, she came to test him with hard questions. She arrived in Jerusalem with a large group of attendants and a great caravan of camels loaded with spices, large quantities of gold, precious jewels. When she met with Solomon, she talked with him about everything she had on her mind. Solomon had answers for all her questions. Nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her. When the Queen of Sheba realized how very wise Solomon was, and when she saw the palace that he had built, she was overwhelmed. She was also amazed at the food on his tables, the organization of his officials, their splendid clothing, the cupbearers, and the burnt offerings that Solomon offered at the temple of the Lord. She exclaimed to the king, "Everything I heard in my country about your achievements and wisdom is true. I didn't believe what was said until I arrived here and saw it with my own eyes. In fact, I had not heard the half of it. Your wisdom and prosperity are far beyond anything I was told. How happy your people must be. What a privilege for your officials to stand here day after day, listening to your wisdom. Praise the Lord your God, who delights in you and has placed you on the throne of Israel. Because of the Lord's eternal love for Israel, he has made you king, so that you can rule with justice and righteousness." And I say, notice how the Queen of Sheba she's giving him a lot of compliments. Maybe she's a little over the top, but you can see that she believes his accomplishments are nothing unless they serve a greater purpose, which would be for him to rule with justice and peace. Verse 10, "Then the queen gave the king a gift of 4,000 kilos of gold, great quantities of spices and precious jewels. Never again were so many spices brought in as those the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. In addition," says the text, "Hiram's ships brought gold from Ophir, and they also brought rich cargoes of red sandalwood and precious jewels. The king used the sandalwood to build railings for the temple of the Lord in the royal palace and to construct lyres and harps for the musicians. Never before or since has there been such a supply of sandalwood." And I say, imagine that. Hiram was the king of Tyre, the most important city at that time of the Phoenician Empire. The Phoenicians were the owners of the largest merchant marine. They owned the seas, yet they put their ships at the service of King Solomon. They brought in the gold, spices, precious stones, and expensive hardwoods from Ophir. That's probably India, near Mumbai. I say all this and I read all this to emphasize that Solomon really had major accomplishments, all the accomplishments he could imagine. Nevertheless, in his search for meaning in life, he concluded that to obtain things, build things, work, negotiate, accumulate, eventually it all ended up the same, chasing after the wind. I always wanted to achieve things. I hoped to win prizes. I tried to be useful and take advantage of opportunities. But time passed by too quickly. I never seemed to have enough time. I don't know how Solomon did all that he did. I don't understand how some of my friends seem to get so far so fast either. Once a family member told me that I needed to learn how to manage my time better. He said I needed discipline, decisions, dedication. He told me that my problem was called procrastination. In other words, I would leave for later what I should be doing now. Many times I felt like Solomon, chasing after the wind. But recently, just in the last months, I discovered a book and I loved the title, Procrastinate on Purpose. In this book, Rory Vaden says that we can learn to multiply our time. The key question we should be asking is not about priority or importance versus urgency, but really about significance. How much does this matter, and for how long will it matter? Instead of asking, perhaps, what is the most important task for me today? People who multiply their time ask, what is the most important task for me today that will make my tomorrow better? Wow. I recommend this book, or at least listen to them on YouTube. For me, I see a relevant application of something important that Jesus said when he was talking about accomplishments, priorities, and the meaning of life. In a moving and profound encounter recorded in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 8, verses 34 to 37, the text says, Jesus called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves or give up their self-centered way of life. Take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul?" So that's a profound passage. Part of what he's saying is that the meaning of life goes far beyond collecting accomplishments as proverbial trophies. What Rory Vaden suggests in his book can easily be found as part of the principle for life that Jesus was teaching. A fulfilling life starts with having a motivation, a why. I must look beyond the moment to the future consequences of my life and consider how my actions and attitudes will impact other people. A meaningful life consists in being other-centered, living to help and serve others as Christ did, as a messenger of reconciliation, forgiveness, and peace. Jesus affirmed what Solomon had concluded, that we are here for something much greater than what we see and feel. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, God has put eternity in our hearts. We are only here for a time, but this is a starting, not an ending place. Jesus said, as Solomon also said, our life is like a flower in the field. It appears and disappears in a puff of wind. But when we keep our eyes on eternity, we bring oxygen to our soul, and we find the possibility of a life filled with meaning by the grace of God. James, the brother of Jesus, wrote in chapter 4, verses 13 to 15, "Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why, you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. To pursue satisfaction and meaning through my accomplishments and my efforts is to simply chase the wind. But to accomplish with my life the purpose for which God designed me will be incredibly fulfilling and meaningful." So today I invite all of us to remember and practice the exhortation of the prophet Micah, who said in chapter 6, verse 8, all that God desires from each of us is that we do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with awareness of God. I'd like to close this morning with the prayer that we prayed last week. It's called the prayer of serenity, and it's a real prayer, and it's asking God for his guidance. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is and not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and incredibly happy in the next with you forever. Amen.